Welcome to Season 2 of Let's Break Up, Toxic Workplace Stories. Join hosts Nicola and Gina as they tackle workplace toxicity head-on. Real-life stories, well-being, and standing against toxicity await you. Let's break up with toxic workplaces and create a revolution of positivity together.
As a disclaimer, Nicola and Gina's opinions are solely their own and don't represent professional advice. It's just their perspective, so form your own conclusions. Heads up, this podcast may contain adult content and explicit language. So let's dive in and break up with toxic workplaces.
Ginny, would you like to introduce your beautiful self to us and our audience?
I would love to. Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So a little bit about me. Let's start with the fun stuff. I love to travel. I love to travel and see places all over the world. Australia and New Zealand are on my list, FYI. Like very high on my list, which I have not been to. And I have a beautiful, perfect red, that's like a ruby color, Cavalier King Charles Spaniel named Francine. So if you hang out with me on Instagram, you will get lots of photos and videos of her. She's gorgeous and amazing. From a work perspective, I am a keynote speaker. I'm a motivational keynote speaker. I'm a #1 best-selling author. My book is called You're My Favorite right here. I have a podcast called Drinking with Gin, and I'm also a life coach. So kind of full circle. And I do all that now after exiting corporate America from having a really successful career spanning over 20 years.
Okay, so
I love that the podcast is Drink with Gin, because my next door neighbor and I are like gin addicts.
Ooh, fun. Well, I'm gin.
Yeah, but gin is such a disgusting alcohol.
No, you got to have it with like good stuff. Like you got to have a good. I've got like a Sauvignon Blanc gin. It is divine.
Never
I don't think we have. Do we have any of those in America? I feel like I've never heard of a Sauvignon.
Oh no,
Blanc.
you will definitely have like small batch ginneries. But there's this awesome book I used to read as a kid called Just Gin, and her name was Ginny, and it was the loveliest book. It was such a good, strong female protagonist, and it was all about how she kind of navigated her teenage years. So I'm kind of loving all of the connections there.
Yes, I love that. I'll have to check that out.
I love that. So can you tell us specifically what industry you were in corporate America before you branched out on your own?
Yeah, I was in medical aesthetics for over 18 years. That was the majority of it. So I worked for some skincare companies. There's Francine. Yeah. So I worked, in medical aesthetics was the bulk of that career.
Okay. So, so medical aesthetics. So for people who might not know what that means, can you like be very simplistic with your description of what medical aesthetics is?
Sure. So if you think of like dermatologists, plastic surgeons, med spas, these are kind of the companies or the different categories that provide medical aesthetic treatment. So, and that can be that can be a wide variety of things. It can be surgeries, it can be skincare, medical grade skincare, it can be injectables, it can be devices like laser devices. So there can be a lot of different things that fall in that category.
Okay.
But I worked on the vendor side. So I didn't work in an office or anything. I worked on the vendor side of things.
So what does that mean in for you? Like you were in the office, you weren't out there doing like pharmaceutical sales sort of, or were you?
Yeah. So I was the bulk of my career I was doing education. So I'd educate the people that work in the practices, or I worked with a lot of corporate accounts. I was usually in leadership roles. Like I said, either education, or I managed teams, or I worked with corporate accounts, which were some of the groups that spanned, that had multiple locations spanning across, a wide area.
Got it. Okay. So tell us about what you liked and what you didn't like there, and what you found to be toxic, and what were some of your red flags and so on.
Okay. Ooh, where to start? So much of it was good, and I've met a lot of really great people. Some of my closest friends I've met over the years from working with them, in some of these organizations. So there's definitely a lot of good. What I do think is really interesting and fascinating is like I've exited and I've gone on this like healing and growing journey, and all of the work that I do now is recognizing that I am a self-diagnosed person that is in narcissistic abuse recovery. And I love helping people with that. But when I look back and I think now, I'm like, well, no wonder I ended up in aesthetics. I mean, it is like there's so much vanity. And I think that there is probably a lot of narcissistic behaviors and tendencies for a lot of the people that are in the industry. And so it's just really fascinating to me when we think about the choices that we make and why and what's familiar. But a lot of it I loved. I mean, I traveled a lot. You work a lot of hours. There's a lot of conferences and events and shows. So you work a lot of nights and weekends. I was traveling all over. I traveled most weeks for probably 12 to 15 years. So on the road a lot. And a lot of people, when I'd meet people traveling, they're like, oh, you travel a lot. Like, what's that like? Is that either people would be like, that must be exhausting, or they're like, that must be so awesome. And like they're, people kind of glamorize travel and traveling for work. But for me, it just became my norm. I always said it was like my commute, instead of just driving to work, I had to get on a plane to go to work. I mean, I have a lot of stories of things that I can share, but I think that there was in, one of the companies I worked at in particular, a lot of toxic leadership, people that were unqualified. There's a lot of talking about culture, but not it actually being what they talk about.
Oh, I love this topic. Yes, I'm so there with you. Can you give us some examples or stories around that? Because that's something that Nicola and I experienced, like talking about how like healthy the culture is, but then when it came down to it, it was like totally the opposite.
So interestingly enough, I decided for this week, my podcast episode that's going to come out on Drinking with Gin is about work-life balance, because I don't think it exists.
It doesn't.
I think it's a big farce.
Oh,
not in America.
Come to New Zealand.
Yeah, that's a caveat. Not in America. In America, we are just like grind, hustle. Like that's the culture we have here.
But I think a lot of people and a lot of leaders will preach work-life balance, right? And so when you're in a culture that you are expected to work all of the time, and like even when I was, leading teams, I'd be like, oh, work-life balance. But then I would be working nights and working weekends and working on vacation. And so I think that's one of the things too, that's like a telltale sign is, are they practicing what they're preaching? And, like if they tell you, oh, we have really great work-life balance, but then you see these behaviors, that doesn't align, right? So when you start to see the misalignment of those things, one of the things that was really interesting is one of the companies I worked for, they talk about how great they treat their employees. And I actually had some experiences that were not so great. And one year at our national sales meeting, all of the wrong people were announced to win President's Club. And when you're in sales, President's Club is the award that you work all year towards, and you win.
Is that like the top tier? Like yes. That's the shit you want to be there.
It's like recognition, like you met or exceeded all your quotas, right? Or like something
sales
like
targets.
Yeah.
Yes. Like you are at the top of the sales force for that year,
right.
Whatever. Every company does it differently, but most companies, it's like you're in like the top 10%. So then you earn this, really nice trip or whatever. Well, they announced all of the wrong people.
How does that even happen?
There were some miscalculations internally. And so people started questioning it. They went back and they never apologized, or acknowledged it even publicly to the entire sales force. They just kind of behind the scenes maneuvered and
straightened it out.
Kind of straightened it out behind the scenes. And part of that was I got a call about 6 weeks later from my boss saying, hey, in the miscalculations of the award trips, we actually found out and figured out that we overpaid you last year.
What?
So,
Oh my God.
so
by how
you're gonna need to write us a check for $24,600.
And I'm sure like you didn't just have that sitting around, right? You probably did something like with the majority of your bonus. I mean, if you did have it sitting around, kudos, but my dumb ass would have been like, what can I buy?
Damn, girl.
But also they expected me to do that. And like, but that's
Like
what I
right then
received.
and there?
But then minus taxes, right? But then they wanted me to make them whole after I paid,
Income
crazy amount of
tax on it.
taxes on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then to top it off, after that conversation, I tried to fight it. And I'm going to give you guys a really good petty princess moment. I've never talked about this before. Like literally my one friend who was an attorney at the time and was helping me with the process. It's so funny. I'll get to that in a second. But then the vice president of sales at the time, so my boss's boss,
Sure.
called me and he goes, "Didn't you notice?" Like putting the onus
Like it's
and the
your
blame
responsibility
on me.
to
I was like,
double check your commission or whatever.
right. And it happened over the year. So it wasn't like one paycheck
Like you had one
was
big
like,
chunk of it was like
yeah,
$50,000, right? It was like
right.
a couple, whatever here
Oh
and there.
my
Okay, I
God.
Yeah, it
got
was
it.
over like 4 quarters of a time period. And it's like, so this is my fault. And I was like, well, no, because I trust my organization to do the right thing and
Mhm.
to make it, to not make mistakes like this. And I'm not an accountant. Like, no,
Right.
so no, that's not my job. My job is to perform well
Hell stuff.
in my role. Yeah.
Right.
And so they would not relent. They would not work with me on it. Nothing. So, what
This is insane.
yeah. So what they did do was they allowed me to have it taken out of and split up into 2 withdrawals, or like what did they do? They deducted it from my next 2 bonuses. Okay. And so they're like, how would you like to have it split up? So I don't remember the exact number. I should have gone back and done this. Like, let me do this on my phone really quick, because what I did was I did the first payment was $13,825.80. And they asked me like 3 times, are you sure that's the amount? And the reason I did that is because if you look at the numbers on your phone, that spelled fuck you.
Yes, queen.
FUCKU.
I love it.
I mean, it was like just like the only way that I could find some humor and some laughter in a really crappy situation. But yeah, so
okay, so hold on. So circling back, so you had to pay this money back.
Yeah.
And you got a lawyer though. Did you get any compensation
was there any like
from
legal?
this? Because this is ridiculous.
No.
So there was
they
nothing
have it.
legally you could have done to help yourself in this situation.
No.
Oh my God.
It was
that's
written
so
into they make you sign every quarter like the incentive compensation plan, and I had signed it, and it does say in there, if the company makes a mistake and overpays you, you have to pay it back.
Oh my God, that is
So
gross.
apparently do you think they have a history of this?
I don't know. That's what I started to wonder after that.
Because
I was like,
why would
I
you
wonder.
put it in like your quarterly?
Contracts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, were you supposed to get a President's Award?
I won that year. I would have won, but then I actually left the company. So I was the
After
I was
they
the
forced
number
you
one.
to pay back that money?
Yeah.
I would have left
Yeah.
too. I would have been like, I'm out of
Yeah.
here.
That was part of it. I mean, it was a long time coming, but yeah. So I would have won that year that I had to pay the money back, which to me was like also a really good way to exit. It's like there's no better time to exit than when you're on top.
Yeah, I can't that's insane. Like, why hire people who are going to make accounting mistakes? Like,
Yeah. And I think I don't think they did anything about that either. Like the person that made all the mistakes, I think that they still are, maybe even still there. I don't know.
This is crazy.
I know,
right,
isn't that
so-
wild?
Cats.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, I mean, like, I always am like, nobody should fuck with my money, no matter how little or how much I have. Like, don't fuck with my money, especially like my livelihood money. Like, that's bullshit.
Oh my God.
I would probably have, did you cry? I would have cried. Honestly.
I would have
Like,
cried.
I would have cried.
I don't remember if I cried. I just remember being so like flabbergasted, like
Yeah,
just
like
so
shocked.
blown away and shocked at the egregiousness of the mistake. And then the trying to flip it onto me. And, you
So
know, like,
gaslighting, right? Like they're just gaslighting
Yeah.
you. You're like, oh, how is this my fault?
yeah, it was really, it was a crazy situation. I had never experienced anything like that.
Did you ever hear of that happening to anyone else at that particular company?
Well, at that, I'm assuming it happened to other people in that same time period who also, you know, when they called the wrong people that
Right,
got the
'cause that
wrong
kind of,
awards
like,
and
made a
other,
whole trickle
yeah, like I'm sure
down
the
effect.
sales reps and sales
Yeah.
managers, I'm imagine that there was other people that also dealt with that same year. Mhm.
Okay, so
This is diabolical.
this is
but
just,
anyway.
yeah. I'm like, it's not like they're like, oh, by the way, we overpaid you $200. Like, no big
No,
deal.
this is like
right?
20K. This is like a substantive amount of money.
That's
This
a
is not even
huge
like
amount of money.
$24,600.
I feel like this is burnt into your brain for the rest of eternity.
Oh, it would have been burnt into my
I know.
brain if that
Yeah.
happened to me.
For
Oh my
sure.
God.
Yeah. You don't forget a mistake like that. That's for sure.
No. Okay, so that's insanity. So I feel like, so, you know, now there's all these like either dramatizations or whatever of like the whole pharmaceutical. Not that you're really in pharmaceuticals, but I feel like it's a very close
Cousin.
Yeah,
of
it was medical device, which is like a cousin. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and we see all these like crazy, you know, shows like on Netflix and Hulu, like about, especially about the opioid pandemic, not saying that you had anything to do with that, but just like the convoluted, Ginny started the opioid pandemic.
It was Ginny's fault.
Ginny's
The
fault.
opioid epidemic.
For the record, I never sold an opioid.
No, I know you didn't. We just took a turn there. Plot twist.
I love it.
Nice. Wow. And
So,
like
like, you
FBI
see-
shows up at Ginny's house. They're like, Yoda.
Yeah, so we heard the origin of the opioid crisis.
Well, I
No, we
did-
shouldn't talk about any of that.
I did
But
work
yeah.
for a company that sold opioids, and they were part of the they're part of the whole opioid
Pandemic.
what do you call it, litigation
Epidemic.
and
I called it
yeah.
the pandemic. Like a
yeah,
fucking idiot.
yeah,
I meant
epidemic.
I meant
for sure.
yeah. Anyway,
Anywho,
so I think,
so-
I
yeah.
think my point is like in a lot of the dramatizations that you watch on whatever you're watching, you see like a lot of dubious sort of behind the scene, like really insane stuff happening, like people fudging, like, you know, efficacy, things like that, or like crazy markups. Like, was there any of that in general? Like with that you even saw? Maybe you didn't see it, but you just have a hunch. Like, was there anything like that?
On an individual basis, there are people that would, you know, use samples for, you know, to reduce cost, which is completely illegal.
Wait, but what does that mean?
Okay, so I'm
So-
guessing that you get samples to give to people, like
Yes.
Your
doctors or some
like
shit.
your vendors, like the doctors or clinics.
Yeah,
or
and they're going to
Exactly.
test it out on what themselves? No, the nurses. They're going to test it out on someone, right? But then
the patient.
they're using it on the patients, which they're not allowed to do because it's a sample.
So it's
No.
more actually the ownership of the sample. So samples are for training, demonstration, education, and evaluation. Okay, so those are the 4 reasons why a rep or a manager or, you know, a company representative would be able to give samples to a doctor or a healthcare provider that is authorized in that state to be able to sign for samples. Once they give them the samples, the doctor can do whatever they want with them. But the rep is only supposed to give them for training, demonstration, education, and evaluation. And they're all labeled, not for resale.
Sure.
This is a sample, like they're all labeled like that. And so a rep should never give it to, reduce the cost or for the doctor's wife or anything like that. But they would do that. There were certain things that we would hear where, they would be using the samples to reduce the cost. Well, if you buy 20, I'll give you 5. And, of wheeling and dealing kind of
like it's
that
like a
way.
gift with purchase so that they don't feel so bad, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. Which to me, if you're doing that,
girl.
you're just a really bad salesperson. Like if you have to do if you buy this, you'll get this. Either you don't know the programs well enough or you're just not doing it right. But
are the samples the same strength as like the actual product?
Yeah.
Like is it like all the same?
Yep, it's exactly the
Okay.
same.
Okay,
Mhm.
I'm like,
what
I'm like,
happens-
oh my God, there's just so many ethical things here that I could unpick, and I'm just like, wait, what?
No, because isn't it like okay, so I remember I got samples of something, I don't remember, but like pills from like my primary. Like they were like, oh, I have, maybe it might have been Zoloft like years ago. They were like, we have samples, we'll get you started with those, then go fill your prescription. Like that's totally ethical, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So it's like if he was saying like, I'm going to sell you all this generic Zoloft and then give you additional freebies on top of it
Yeah.
to sweeten the deal. That's where it gets fuzzy.
Yeah. And so where it gets hairy is like what you're talking about with prescriptions, like it doesn't really apply.
It can't happen as much, right?
You don't, they're not selling the product, but in aesthetics, you're buying the product and then turning around and selling it to the patient for cash, right? It's not covered by insurance or anything like that. So that's where the finances, kind of like that crazy part come into play.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. All right. So was that the most unethical thing that you saw in general? People doing that?
Gosh, unethical. Just define unethical. So
You
I
tell
actually
us what you
had-
think is unethical, and then we'll broaden our definition for you.
I love it. So I had a coworker. We were all at a meeting in South Beach, Miami.
Right by me. Yep.
And we all went out and, everybody's been drinking and whatever. And this coworker who's married with a child goes to hand me his hotel room key and says, my room is room number, blah, blah, blah. I'll be up in a few minutes. And I was like, no, like, what are you talking about? And he was like, whoa, I must have, completely misread. And I was like, yeah, you did. I've never given any indication that I'm interested in you. You're married. You have a kid. You're my coworker. I'm leaving and going back to my hotel. And fast forward like 2 years later at another meeting in Fort Lauderdale, happened to also be in Florida. Same guy.
Florida get all the weirdness?
I don't know. Same guy. It just happened to be where the meetings were. Like meetings happen a lot in like Florida, California. It's just kind of where they happen to be. Same guy hands me his room key again and was like, and I was like, no.
We did this before, remember?
Yeah, remember? Well, and his response was insane. He goes, this is the second time you've done this to me.
So that's it, Nicola. She's like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
The second time you've done this to him.
Yes. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did you
he
ever?
later?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, he later on became my boss. That was fun.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. And just like to tie in, oh my gosh, I have a lot of stories about him. I have two more stories about him if you want to hear, which are
Let's hear it.
fascinating.
So
Nicola's already exhausted. It's like
Like,
5 a.m. there, and she's already exhausted
horrifying.
from hearing this story.
But this is the kind of stuff like
diabolical.
that we dealt with, you know?
Mhm.
So fast forward then like another year, yeah, maybe only like one more year.
No, tell me he does it a third time.
He did not do it a third time, but I get a phone call from him, and I was always friendly with him still. I mean, I had to
Did
work
you
with
ever
him.
did you ever talk about the elephant in the room? Were you like, hey, just want to clear the air? Or was it just like,
No.
don't ask, don't tell?
Yeah, I think just because I'm like, I'm a professional and like, why even acknowledge it? Like, why even acknowledge his bad behavior? I don't know. Like,
Okay,
I just felt
understand.
like kind of take the high road type of thing. So fast forward to the end of the next year, and he calls me. It's the end of the year. It's like the end of the quarter. I'm like thriving in my role. Like my role at that point, I think I had been in it for a few years. It was just like I could do it like the back of my hand. I mean, it was just
Right.
like I was dialed in. I had it. Like I had really good balance in life. And so he calls me, he's like, how you doing? How you liking your role? And I was like, dude, I'm bored. I'm just like on autopilot. This is great. Like, da 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 da. Like, I mean, it's totally fine. Like, I'm not challenged. I'll have to probably figure something else out at some point. But for right
Mhm.
now, like, it's working for me. And
Yeah.
at that time, I was with my ex, who was the catalyst of like
Oh,
writing
yes,
my
we're gonna talk
book and
about that. Yes.
and everything else. And the next day, it was announced that he was my boss. So the a-hole was calling me to like get inside scoop and like completely manipulate the situation to see where I was at, knowing that I would be more open with him than if I were the following day, knowing that he was my boss, which I just thought was such an inauthentic, shitty thing to do.
It's so duplicitous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so he obviously knew he was getting the promotion by that point.
Yeah. It was
Ugh.
announced the next day. Yeah. So
Oh,
gross.
God.
So then fast forward, and I love how this guy always like, okay, I have two more stories about him.
You're like, he keeps popping up.
Well, that's like the repeat offenders. That's what they do.
Yes,
They're like,
and there
I always
are
say,
Recidivist.
many.
yeah, they're like whack-a-mole. They're like the game of whack-a-mole. They keep and you like hit and knock them down, and then they pop back up. So then, so then, like fast forward into that year, and I asked because I am always someone who like wants to be growing and be developed and know where my areas of opportunity are and like where I'm really strong so that I can balance, or if I have an area of opportunity, like lean on somebody else and pull from their strengths. Like I very much believe in that. So I asked to do a 360, which is a 360 review is where you get either like if you're a leader, I didn't have any direct reports at this time in this role. So it was kind of just like a select group. And then they anonymously give you feedback. And I had done this a few times over the years. Like when I had a team, if you have a team, your team gives you feedback, your direct, like your boss who you report directly to, and, whoever else is in the mix. So I do this review. I ask for this 360 review. We send it out, get all the feedback. He calls me and he's like, oh man, I just did you such a solid. Like I just finished your 360 review. You're welcome. Well, what he didn't know was that your direct boss, their feedback is not anonymous. And while everyone else rated me 4s and 5s, he would rate me like a 1 or a 2. 1 or 2 is really bad.
So how did he do you a solid?
He was trying to like
Take credit for
gamify,
everyone else's reviews.
but he didn't know that I could literally see every single one of his ratings. Every single thing he wrote was not anonymous. And I'll tell you one thing I've always stood
I'm
against.
so sorry. This is so funny because like the fact that he called me out of his way to be like, I really
Yeah.
I did you a solid.
Yeah.
Like I really helped you out here, man. And then it was did you please, I hope you called him out on it.
Okay, no, I did cry after that. I could not believe that somebody would blindside me, bold-faced lie to me like that so badly. Someone who you should be able to trust, right? Like you should be able to trust what someone says to you, especially your boss. And
Sure.
I was horrified by it. The other thing that he wrote in there was, you need to gossip less. And here's the thing, like, this is what I was about to start to say is I am not about gossip. Like, in fact, I would say I am probably one of the people, like, I think it's why my coaching works so well. And my friends and like strangers come and open up to me and share their stories. Like, this happens all of the time. People are like, you're the only person that I've talked to about this, because I always have this saying of like, it's not my story to tell. If people ask me about someone and what they're going through, I'm like, it's not my story to tell. And I really feel that way because people were gossiping about my story when I was going through my stuff. And I think that like really made me solidify that kind of mentality so much more, because it wasn't anybody's business to be talking about.
Sure.
Until I made it everybody's business to be talking about and wrote a book about it. But
Right. But that's different. That's on your own
that's
timeline.
different. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's on your timeline with your narrative. So yes. So
Yeah.
did you say anything to him? Like, how did you handle that? Did you go to HR or what happened?
I didn't go to HR. I'm pretty sure I did talk to him about it, or maybe I didn't. I don't even remember. Honestly, like I think I blocked it out, but I remember I did. Like I cried. My partner at the time, I really like, I cried to him. I was really upset about it. I just was so blown away that somebody would deceive you so badly like that, like literally call you, tell you how they helped you out, did you a favor, did you a solid, and then did the exact opposite, especially when I was doing it voluntarily for my own development to really continue to try to grow. But him saying like gossip less, I'm not a gossiper. But what I think would make him mad, because he is the biggest gossip around town, like literally
I call those
on
things like a tell. Like, where is this coming from? And it was probably his own insecurities. And he's like, I'm gonna blame it on her.
Well, what I think it was is if he would come to me and give me information or news or whatever, oftentimes I would already know. And I think that pissed him off. So I think it made him mad that I already knew the information before
So
him.
let's punish you in your 360 review.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't tell him because I didn't engage in gossip, but people feel comfortable telling me things. But yeah. So those were kind of interesting.
Whatever happened to him is like, do we know where he landed? Did karma get him?
No, he can. Gosh, I don't know. But here's what I can tell you. Like, this was my best way. Here's another like petty princess moment. This was the way that it's not getting back by any means. So I actually saw him recently at a celebration of life. And I was kind of put in a position to end up having to hang out with him in a group and whatever. And it was fine. Like it was fine. I knew I wasn't going to see him again or really talk to him again, but for the sake of the group, I entertained and it was fine. It was like, I'm fun. Okay. So we're all having a good time. And at the end of the night, he always called me GP. Hey, GP, man.
Ooh, those
this
are my
was so
too.
Oh, 2 GPs. So he's like, man, I had such a great time with you today. Like this was so awesome, man. I've really missed you. I was like, huh. Well, that's interesting considering I haven't heard from you one time in the last 3.5 years.
Right.
And what did he say?
He goes, well, I haven't heard from you either.
You're like,
and I go,
Dick, you lied to my face. Okay, go ahead.
All I said was, yeah. And that was
my God, this is amazing.
That was like the mic drop. Yeah. That was the mic drop moment.
Did he ever find out that his like scoring of you, like the rating or whatever in the 360 was transparent?
Was not anonymous?
Yeah. Did he ever know that? Did he ever figure that out?
I don't know. Oh gosh, I wish I knew the answer. I wish I knew. Honestly, like I'm so sorry. I should have done my due diligence.
Golly, Ginny.
I would love to have known, because like just the arrogance on people like that, like workplace bullies, like they just, yeah. All right. So I know that like we talked about this in our like vetting call or whatever. What are we calling those now? Our meet and greets?
Meet and greets.
Okay.
Meet and
I
Vetting
know that
sounds like we're like the fucking police, please.
like we're actually somebody like serious and it's just you and me. Yeah. Like
Yeah,
we're doing
please. Go for
and
it.
we are talking about something serious, but we're very relaxed about it. Okay. So I know you said that you had identification with both myself and Nicola because you said you didn't realize how bad it was until you left it. And then you started seeing all the toxicity around you. Can you tell us what that journey looked like for you?
Yeah, I think part of it was, they very much were a coach and reward on money and things. And so it was very much like coach on money and rewards, practice what, like they don't practice what they preach in leadership. I mean, by that, there's a lot of, two-facedness, right? Like what I just described, I actually had that with another leader before that. She pretended to be my friend and then completely stabbed me in the back, which was also terrible. But I also had some really good leaders. I had one of my best leaders was at that organization. But like, for example, there's just this overarching feeling of like that they own you almost. Like you can't have, like, it's okay for people that have kids and families to have interests outside of work, like their kids' sports and, that kind of stuff. But if you aren't, like, if you don't have kids or a family, like you can't post about your side hustle or your extracurricular activities. Like that's one of the things that I thought about, that I was so grateful that my book didn't come out when I worked at that organization, because I just know the chatter that everybody would have been having behind the scenes. And fortunately, I was still in corporate when my book came out, and I had the most incredibly supportive boss at my corporate job. She flew out to Minneapolis to come to my book launch. And when I finally got up the courage to tell her about it, because I think I had been conditioned for so long, like, don't talk about like anything else, because that could take away from work. A few months before the book came out, her and I were having dinner, and I sat down and I told her, I was like, hey, I just want you to know there's something I've been working on. You're going to start seeing about it and hearing about it. And she was so excited, like so excited for me, and was like, people should have interests outside of work. And I was so shocked and blown away by it, because of, the environment that I had come from. And so there's, like, it's really interesting. And then like the rewarding based on, money and things, like, I mean, I have all of these things. Like I won jewelry, like really expensive jewelry. I won a Peloton. People won like Louis Vuitton gift certificates. They would do this, but then the second people weren't performing, or were questioning the goals of maybe like 40% year over year, it was then they would come back and talk about how ungrateful. And, it's definitely more of like that stick mentality than carrot. And so for me too, just part of like my own journey has been things just becoming so much less important. And it just not mattering as much anymore, right? Like you start to find what really is valuable in life, and it shines a light, I should say, on, some of that more toxic behavior and environments.
So I know you started seeing toxic stuff happen personally. What do you think came first? Was it like seeing the toxicity in your workplace or your personal life, or how did that work for you?
I think there's components of it that I felt at work for a long time, but I think I didn't have really the awareness. Like, for example, there was this one guy who, I mean, slept with everybody, and he was in a leadership role, and he was just going around, and like people were talking about it and knowing about it, but it got like swept under the rug, and other people in leadership were burying the bodies for him, basically. It's like they were they knew about it, but just like kind of turned a blind eye. And so like there wasn't ever any correction for, bad behavior.
Sure. Okay. So wait, by the way, did we ever find out what your book is about? I don't even think we talked about it that much in our meet and greet. What's your book about?
So my book, You're My Favorite, is about my own it's a true story of the shocking and traumatic end to a romantic relationship. I can give you like quick cliff notes, but it really was the thing that sent me on this journey of like growing, healing, self-discovery, self-love.
Tell us
Made
a little
me
bit more about that.
so much more aware of everything going on in my life, the community, the people, all of it. So basically what happened, I was traveling, like if you think about my life, like I was the quintessential single girl. Like I was traveling for work all the time, really career focused. Like I know you brought up Netflix earlier, kind of like main character energy. I was traveling all over the world with my friends and my free time, spending time with my friends or mostly my dogs and living the life. So I get introduced to this guy, Chad, I call him.
Of course it's such a Chad. Wait.
Well, that's not his real name. No, that's not his real name. But he hates that name, so that's why I used it.
Okay, great.
So I get introduced to him and I was not interested for two reasons. A, my life was so great, but then also he had two kids. And that can just get complicated. And he broke down the barriers, we start dating, and then of course I fall in love, and then I meet his kids and I fall in love 2 more times. And before you know it, like he is definitely like moving the relationship along really fast. I was kind of slow. And then, like once I fell in love, then things just continued to move really fast. They move in to my house, and mind you, they have a wonderful mother. At the time, they spent about 40% of the time with us, 60% with her. And but now I have this instant family, which is a complete flip from what my life was before. And we dated for just under a year and a half. And we had just gotten back from this really elaborate trip to Italy, which of course I footed the bill for.
Okay, wait. Can I just make a prediction? Because I'm like such a true crime fan, everything was a fucking lie. And he was like kind of conning you. Okay, don't say if I'm right or not. Let's hear the rest of the story. We'll find out if I'm right. Go ahead.
Okay. So we get back from this really great trip. I had to turn around like 1 or 2 days later and go on another work trip. And
okay, just so that I'm 100% sure that I'm following here. We've been dating for like a year and a half. Him and the children's have moved into your home.
Yeah, why your home?
Yeah, why the fuck your home?
Ginny, like I have so many questions, but
I've got so many follow-up questions here. So we're in your home.
We're in my home. The home I still live in now.
Okay, but wait, how did he get you to foot the bill to Italy?
Yeah, what does he do for a job?
What did he say? Like, oh, my wire transfer from the banks didn't go through.
My Western Union didn't come through.
Oh, girl, if I told you,
go ahead.
If I told you the number of times that his credit card had fraud or what, like, I can't even.
Okay.
So they're living in my house because he rented. And so how he approached the conversation with me was, well, how much longer should I sign this lease for, or should I should I at all? Should we move in together?
Well, okay. So, at what point did he move in though? Like at what point in this year and a half did he move in?
Like,
if you tell me like 6 months, I'm coming to punch you in the tit.
Shut up.
It was not 3 months. It was not 6 months. They moved in
at 1 month. No,
it was like 9 or 10 months. So like we started dating in August.
We approved.
Okay.
We started dating in August.
I'm not punching you in the tit today, so we're good. We're good.
He brought it up in April and then kind of slowly started, moving in, and was fully moved in, I think, in like June.
Because that's a big commitment to move kids in as well.
Huge.
Like that's like a thing. Because we've all like, I don't know if you've got kids, but we've both got kids, and I'm like, that's a fucking event.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
it's a huge event
on their age, like getting them comfortable in a new environment. If
oh my
like
God, how old were these children? How old are these children?
So one thing I don't say is their age or gender, because I'm very protective of them. We still are in each other's lives. We're still really close.
Oh, that's nice.
Good. But
so
it can be like a big event in a kid's life, depending on their
Yeah.
age. Like,
I had
you know,
already created.
Can we have like a group age here? Like, are we younger or older? Like, are we
They
below
were
10 or
younger.
after 10?
yeah, they sound
Before.
like they were
Yeah,
younger.
they were
Yeah.
younger.
Okay.
And I had already created space. Like I had already turned the downstairs bedroom in my home, a bedroom for them because they spent so much time there. And so he rented, he didn't own, I owned. And so that it made the most sense. And I had just bought my house the year we started dating. So like that house, I had moved from a different home that I
Sure.
actually still have and rent out. But
Was he at
so
least paying you rent?
you're so cute. That's adorable, Gina. No.
Girl, I'm dead.
I hate this. Like, I hate past Ginny right now for this.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I want to
Yeah.
come give past Ginny a punch in the boob and a hug simultaneously.
Right. I know. Well, here's the thing. And here's one thing that I'm actually really grateful for is that I am a generous person. And
get
I'm
that.
really glad that I didn't let this taint that for me or like jade me with still being generous with my friends and my family and the people that I am close with in my life. But I'll tell you, I've made some changes in my community. I've made some big changes and shifts just because of what I came to learn about myself, about my growing up, about my history. That I kind of said earlier, like this narcissist abuse recovery, that's a really big part of my journey for me. And understanding why I allowed him in my life is because a lot of his behaviors were familiar to me.
Yes, I completely identify with that.
yeah.
This is reminding me of a guy that I dated. Not necessarily the monetary stuff, but just like knowing he's lying to you, but
Yeah.
at that moment either not picking up on it or refusing to pick up on it. Like, I still go back and think about this one particular relationship that was very traumatic for me. And I'm like, how did I not know? But then there's like a little voice in the back of my head that's like, girl, you knew. But like, you just
Girl,
didn't- yeah,
you
like
just didn't admit
you
it
just
to yourself.
yeah, like you didn't want to think about it. So you just kind of like pushed it away because you were like so gaga over the guy. I totally get that. Okay. So
Okay.
my question is, what did he tell you for you to pay for Italy? That he was going to pay you back?
No, it was just like,
The same
I
thing, like my
just did
cards
it.
aren't
Did the children
working.
go to Italy too?
no, they didn't
thank
go. That
Jesus.
was just, that was just an adult trip. But I did take them. I took them on their first time to see the ocean. I still take them on vacations, them and their mom. The four of
that's
us go
awesome.
on spring break. So
I love this.
they,
Okay, so you come
that
back.
part's fun. So I
That
come back.
makes sense.
I got shingles on my face.
Oh
I
my
actually
God,
just took a
babe,
picture
how
that I'm going to
stressed were
post.
you that you got
Yeah,
shingles?
exactly. On my face in my 30s. Like that is not normal. Like unless you are under
And it swells so bad. Girl.
It was so bad. I have a pretty bad scar. You can't see it here. I actually was just before I came here, I was about to like post some stories on social media because I was like, well, I have my makeup on, so I might as well get on camera. And the way the lighting was, like you could just see the scar on my face really well. So I snapped it to share. And like, because I think paying attention to our bodies and our intuition, especially as women, I think that we ignore it often. And once you
That's what we did with
it,
these guys, right?
yes,
Like we knew, but we
Yep.
still ignored it. Yep.
Yep. And once you ignore your intuition and it was right, you never do that again. And so I think that was a
I'm
big part.
special because it took me many times to be like, I should have
Okay.
trusted my gut. And then it's like, same thing happens 2 years later. I knew I should have trusted. Like, there's a saying though, like the first time you see the hole in the road, you walk into it because you want to know what it is. Maybe you do that 2 more times. And then eventually you start walking around it a little bit and kind of peer in. And then like maybe the 6th time, you know, the hole's there, you just completely change your direction. So that was my pattern with like really bad behavior like that on my part. So that's awesome that you were able to correct it so quickly. I'm a hard case, I guess.
Well, that's okay. I mean, and maybe it wasn't. I mean, this was just the last time, right? Like this was the thing
I get
because
that
it
too.
shook me to my core so hard. This whole experience was so jarring and so shocking.
Yeah.
So a month later, and the shingles on my face were because like I knew something was wrong. We actually went home. I went home and we had a big conversation that weekend. He totally gaslit me. I wouldn't have moved my kids into your house, like trying to then make me feel guilty. And mind you, he had moved like 6 times in 5 years. So don't talk to me about uprooting your kids. So anyway, fast forward a month later, and I'm on a work trip and I get a message from a friend and she urgently wants to get together with me that night for cocktails. I land at 9:37 p.m. on a Tuesday.
Girl,
and I'd actually,
that's pajama
yeah.
time.
Yeah, totally. So like, I'm like, I love cocktails, but not at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday. And this friend and I had never met for cocktails before, like workouts or coffee, but never cocktails. And on a Tuesday, I also had asked the kids' mom if we could have the kids that night. It was a Tuesday, which was not our normal night. We had them Thursdays to Sunday, but we were leaving town that weekend for my nephew's wedding. And so I loved the mornings with the kids. Like that was our special time, like breakfast, bring them to school. They're so sweet in the morning, like making the lunches, like the whole thing. So I was really excited to get home and have that special morning with them the next day. So this friend wants to meet me, and, I was like, well, my life was pretty good. Like loved this family unit that I had, even though I never really, expected to have it. And so all day I'm going in thinking, well, how am I going to show up and be a good friend? Like whatever's going on with her, obviously it's something really big. Like I want to be there for her and support her. So I walk into the restaurant, like ready to take it on, like take on the world for her. And I sit down, she's got an empty drink. I don't know how many she had, but empty drink, a stack of papers. She's sobbing. And I sit down in the booth. I order, we order around, and I reach across the table and I'm like, I've been so worried about you all day. What is going on?
Oh no.
And she said, it's not about you, or it's not about me. It's about you. It's actually about Chad. And she had this arrangement of evidence of lies, deception, betrayal. Like the guy that was at home in my bed at that time was not who I thought he was at all. I had been bamboozled, conned. I mean, it was, and just more and more stuff has continued to come out. Like even recently, I have a really funny, juicy story that's happened recently that I can share. But yeah, so I went home, I confronted him. I was very careful about the amount of information that I gave him because I wanted to see how he responded and what he would, divulge and share. And after like 45 minutes, he basically was like, I know this is more important, but I have to get up for work in 4 hours. So I'm going to go to bed. And he like literally went and slept on the couch.
Did he even have a job?
Yeah, he's a personal trainer.
Oh,
self-employed. Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's a job. Okay, wait. So what kind of lies are we talking here? Was he like a different personality? Like, did he have a different family? Like, what level of psychopathicness are we talking here?
Yeah.
So like, there are countless women that he countless at this point.
Is he just like shell gaming woman?
Yes. And
or is he conning them for money?
He's not necessarily conning them for money. I was the perfect host for him because he didn't, contribute to the mortgage. He didn't pay bills. I did everything. I did the grocery shopping. I traveled for work. So that gave a lot of space and freedom for him to do who knows, whatever. Like I always say, if there's one thing this guy should be teaching, it's time management. But now, I mean, at this point, countless women have reached out to me and they're like, I dated him at this time. I dated him on and off for 8 years.
Of course,
sure. Yeah.
How are you not doing a podcast on this?
Oh, I do. We talk about this and drinking with Jen.
Good.
We talk about the juicy stuff, the after, the growing, the, all the good stuff. I actually have done some TV segments about this because like this recent event was really juicy. But as soon as my book came out, women started like reaching out to me slowly, gradually, like, oh my gosh, I'm also a victim of the real life Chad. Like I had no idea how many women there actually were. But he's also like, countless, like legitimately, I have no idea. So he also,
your best guesstimate, would it be like hundreds or thousands?
Oh yeah. Well, maybe thousands, maybe hundreds for sure.
Definitely hundreds.
Definitely
okay,
hundreds.
Management. This guy is on top of his shit.
How is this
impacting? Like my question is how is this impacting the children? Because he's obviously using them as like a little dangly carrot.
The most difficult part for me still today is to see the continued manipulation and emotional abuse that those
my
kids
God.
endure from him.
I've got like itchy
They-
head now.
I know. They went a long period where they didn't speak to him or see him at all. They don't like seeing him. They don't like spending time with him. So they literally only go to see him one day a week. And that vacillates because he a lot of times doesn't show up because he's flaky.
Naturally.
We don't think he does taxes. So I think he's a huge financial fraud. He makes it seem like he does really well and, like has all this money. He doesn't have a dime in the bank. He has no savings for his future, like nothing. He was charging clients credit cards for services not rendered. Like multiple of his former clients canceled their credit cards to get new ones because they didn't trust that, what else would he do with it? I think one of the most
nobody like actually went to like the police about him doing
No.
like that's like illegal what he's doing. It's like credit
Yeah.
card, like it's
Yeah.
fraud.
Yeah. Wait until you hear this. So one of the things that he told the woman that kind of came forward to blow things up and make me aware, he told her that the reason I couldn't find out about her is because he and the kids needed my health insurance because the youngest had brain cancer.
Why do all these scamming motherfuckers always make up somebody with cancer? Every single scam, man, woman, somebody has cancer and somebody gets into a car accident. How many car accidents did he get into?
Yep. There were no, they weren't even on my health insurance. So that in itself was a lie. There was no cancer, no brain cancer.
Of course not.
He would leave, he would lie. He would leave my house when I'd be gone. And by the way, I had a geriatric, elderly dog at this time, and he would just abandon and neglect and leave my dog.
I hate everyone. I hate people.
And then one of I think the most grandiose things that he does. So he used to work for this nutrition company, and he would go talk at this chiropractic school. So he just took it upon himself to start acting like he's a chiropractor, a doctor, and would perform chiropractic adjustments on people. And legit,
They would pay for them?
I don't know if they pay for them, but one of his
a broken back.
Well, I mean, if he hasn't already, you can easily give somebody a stroke or worse, right? Again, it's not only illegal, but the grandiosity of playing a doctor when you're not. But one of his buddies is a soccer coach at a college, and he will send, I had seen his college athletes go in and get adjusted by him.
From
and
Chad.
It's from Chad.
From
and it's
Dr. Chad.
From Dr. Chad. So it's if you knew that your college kid was being sent to this faux chiro,
I can't.
horrifying. I can't, right?
Did the friend know he was a fake chiropractor? Or maybe the friend was also bamboozled. We don't know.
We don't know. Well, that friend reached out to me
goes so deep
about the book and was yeah, I mean, it's wild. The story is juicy. Okay, so let me tell you this one more juicy part, because so there's this secret Facebook group that is basically to women will post photos of a guy and be like, hey, does anybody have any tea, or are there any red flags? So this just happened a few months ago. It was almost exactly to the date a year after my book came out, and a photo of him was posted. Literally, almost instantly, over 100 women commented. So then they all start chatting with one another. They all start DMing. They all start sharing my book, sending pictures of it. Oh my gosh, you have to read her book. It's about him. They all start reaching out to me. I get this, my book goes to #1 bestseller.
Yes,
queen.
all
these, I know they're all supporting it, sharing it. They're all reaching out to me. They're reaching out to one another. And then another photo was posted of him. And so this is why I say countless, because I legitimately can't even keep track of all of these women.
Who knows how far the reach went? If it was just women, maybe men. I feel like men would be less likely to report on something like that. If their dude friend conned them, they'd probably be so embarrassed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So they're all sharing. Your book goes to bestseller. This is so cool. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. And so they've all been, like creating community and connection. And what the silver lining of it all is, I had no idea when I, shared my story. It's, very personal to me. It was really traumatic what I went through. And luckily it did send me on a journey of like post-traumatic growth. And now I use that to help other people, right? Like share their stories, give validation, coach them through transition, transformation, all of that. But these women have been, they've reached out. Like I had no idea how many, like, obviously I knew I hoped that I would raise awareness of the Chads of the world out there, but I had no idea how many actual people have been impacted by the Chad.
This
And
particular one, yeah.
This one guy. And the amount of people that have reached out and said, you sharing your story has provided me validation, or it's given me closure and clarity on a situation that was really confusing for me. It was really difficult. It was really painful. The number of women that said it completely destroyed them. Like he completely destroyed them. It destroys their confidence. It makes them like confused. And so to be able to provide that for people and create connection and community with one another. On Saturday, I happened to be at a football game, and another one of the women that had reached out to me happened to be there too. So we met up and got to meet each other in person. He actually had called her to try to, so I was on TV about this. I was on a nationally syndicated talk show about this whole Facebook story and, everything. Cause it's juicy, it's kind of crazy.
So cool how it happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And he heard about it, or, he heard about that I was on TV and found out about this private Facebook group, and someone gave him access to the comments.
I hate everyone.
So, yeah,
I hate these people.
He called one of the women and was like, I can't believe you didn't defend me and say what a good guy I am.
Babe.
When like 1,039 other women are like, even if like, let's say she even did that, like when all the proof is there. So wait, this leads me to a question. How did your friend know?
Yeah.
Before you knew?
So I was told, I don't believe that, I don't know that I necessarily believe what I was told, but what I was told is that she was showing pictures at a mom's group on her Instagram, from my Instagram, of our trip to Italy, saying, oh, my friend just got back. Look what a great trip it was. And one of the women recognized Chad in my photos.
I was like, that's my boyfriend.
I
was
think
her friend.
she banged him at some point.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. We're not friends anymore either. I had to actually eliminate her from my life. That was one of the things I really discovered, was the close proximity of like the few people that were really close to my life were very toxic. I think the reason why she told me is because she wanted me to be indebted to her, and she wanted to have the control in my life and like be my hero, be the hero that
like a savior of your life.
Yeah. So I've gone on to be my own damn savior.
Yeah, good. I mean, like that's what happens. My story is not the same, but it was a serial like womanizer in a certain like friend group, and like when it all spilled out and he got like a few of us pregnant at the same time, and like it kind of just all exploded, and it was so devastating. Like it made me feel suicidal. And this, I was like in my like late 20s, early 30s at the time. And like, if that had, first of all, if it happened to me now, I'm also now 40, gonna be 44. I would never, like, I would already see the signs, like, but like you, I finally was like I ended up feeling bad for him. Like, I was like, he is just a sick human being, like someone who can have multiple sex partners every day. Like, that's a sickness. Like, that is not any reflection of me. I happen to just be in his crosshairs because he liked the way I looked, it was no reflection of me, but it took me a really long time to get to that point where like I didn't feel like everything was wrong with me. Like I was fat, I was ugly, like, whatever. I remember
Can we circle back to Fat Cunt with a Gun? So I feel like that's the theme title of the year.
No, but like I remember like laying on my really close friend's couch and just like sobbing and being like, I'm
Mhm.
disgusting. Like, what's wrong with me?
Mm.
To like
Exactly.
internalize that. And then,
Yeah.
but then it, over the process and like learning how many other women it affected and like getting phone calls from them like a year plus later being like, this is no longer my problem. Like, you deal with it. Like, I'm out. I've been out, since I found out all of these disgusting things this person has done. Was just really good closure, and like
Yeah.
eventually I'm going to ask you this question, but I'm going to start it with, so eventually karma got him. He got into a really bad motorcycle accident and like one of his legs was like severely damaged and he's not the same. And I remember a friend of mine heard about it and asked me, like, was I okay? And I'm like, well, what do you mean, am I okay? Like, this was years after all of that, the nastiness happened. And I'm like, what do you mean, am I okay? I was like, he doesn't affect me. It was just like reading it in the newspaper for me. It was like, oh, that's too bad. Like, whatever. And that was really like my moment. And I was like, I have no feeling about this person anymore. And like, that's the power.
Mhm. Yeah. I would say that love and hate are actually really closely related emotions.
Mhm.
And it was my first TV interview after my book came out, and they were like, "Man, you must hate him." And I said, "I'm indifferent. I'm
And that's
indifferent
the
towards
power.
him."
When
Yeah.
I realized, like, when my friend asked me, like, how do you feel about it? And I was like, why would, like, I was genuinely like, why would you think that I would even have an opinion on this? That's when I was
Mhm.
like, I know I'm over this. Like, I have nothing, like, that's too bad it happened, but you live your life like that, you know,
So
you're
how
lucky
has
that this is the only thing that happened.
so how do you feel like this has impacted you, like, circling all the way back to toxic workplaces? How
Yeah.
do you feel like
So
this
how
is
did this reflect like in your employment? Like I'm sure that you were like a complete stress ball, completely freaking out. Like what happened with work? Like were you still showing up? Did people question what was going on with you? Like what was that looking
Yeah.
like?
Well, I was supposed to be going to my nephew's wedding that weekend. I had to
Right?
cancel. I missed my nephew's wedding, which was devastating. But I called I had that wonderful boss that we talked about at the beginning. He
Mhm.
was my boss at the time that this happened.
Oh,
And I basically
perfect.
just called and said, I need the rest of the week off. I have some, personal stuff going on. And I just
Mhm.
kind of left it at that. I just kind of kept a low profile. I think I had to travel for work the following week. And my colleague that I was going to do like a dinner, like a business dinner with, he asked me a question. I just said, look, this is what's going on. I'm not ready to talk about it. And he really respected it. And I'm still like, we're still friendly to this date. He's a great guy. Um, but I think for a while, I just was going through the motions. Like I was really lost. I was a mess. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I like dropped 2 sizes. My body was just so stressed, like in constant fight or flight. I questioned everything in life. But I was still showing up to work. And I think I probably kind of threw myself into work a little bit. And that's why I, won the award the next year. After that was then the last year. That was the year I exited that company. Um, so yeah, it was hard to show up. But I think sometimes when you're in that state of grief, all you can do is just do the next thing. Right. So I was really reliant on my schedule and just like knowing that I had to do the next thing. And it was about 5 or 6 months after the split where I started writing the book. And so I would then just like spend my flights writing. I was just like furiously writing and, thinking about how I was going to put this story out into the world. And then I shelved it for about a year and a half, came back to it and, brought it out into the world. But, to answer your question about like, how did this change me in terms of like my work environment and, recognizing toxic work environments. I think one of the things for me that was a really big learning lesson was that because sometimes people think about narcissists. And I think it's a really flippantly thrown around word now, but that's why I bring like experts. I refer to medically reviewed journals on my podcast when we talk about things like that, like gaslighting and the gray rock method and narcissists. People often think of it just in romantic relationships. And part of what I like to talk about is that they can be anywhere.
Mhm.
You know, they might be your family member, they might be your coworker. And so one of the things that really changed for me, Gina, kind of like what you were saying, is like, now you can recognize it. Like I can spot it a mile away. Like you are not getting anywhere near. It's like I have it's like it put a magnifying glass on it for me. And at my last company, I had a very toxic coworker. And I had to start like implementing some of the tactics and things that I had learned on my, journey of gathering information and coming to understand it. And the second I didn't have to work with her anymore, I like completely removed her from my life.
Mhm. So
And
what
it
were
was
some of the things that you used to kind of deal with her? Like, was it like very forceful boundary setting, or like what were the tools that you ended up learning that were good for both personal and professional?
boundaries. She didn't respect boundaries.
No, well, they usually
Um,
don't. Toxic
yeah.
people usually don't, but yeah.
So I started reducing my interactions and contact with her. I wouldn't answer her phone calls because she would call me a lot of times like outside of work hours.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
would try to keep all communication on email so that it was documented.
Yeah.
And then I started actually tracking things. It was the first time in my entire career I did go to HR. They didn't do anything about it. But I had like clear documentation. She actually had called me. She had the audacity to call me on New Year's Eve at like after 5:30 p.m. to
I
tell me
hate
that
everyone.
she had a problem with my social media. And I was like, cool, unfollow me. And then
What?
and that was my reaction. I was like, okay, well then unfollow me.
Right,
We
because
are
it's
we are
a lot
colleagues.
of it is how you react to the situation, because you
Mm-hmm.
can't control anyone. And I had to
No.
learn this the hard way because my business partner and we don't really get along. And I had to realize, like, if I react a certain way, he will react a different way. So
Mm-hmm.
once I changed myself, things kind of got better.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, exactly. Like, oh, sorry to hear that. Maybe don't follow
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. But then she wanted to go down this, well, other people from work follow you. And I was like, okay. And then she said, well, everyone else is just out there working so hard. I said, oh, well, now you're questioning my work ethic. And we were equals. We were both directors and then senior directors. So we were equals. Like it wasn't like I worked for her. And then I did tell her, I said, well, actually our boss is aware of some of the extracurricular things that I do outside of work and she's supportive.
Hmm. So basically go F yourself, lady.
Yeah. So it was just like you said, you can't control other people's reactions and the way they behave, but you can control how you respond. And that's, at the end of the day, all you can do. So I tried to limit my interactions with her. There's this really passive aggressive thing that she did. We had this leadership meeting, and at the end of it, it was very risky. I wasn't sure how I felt about it to begin with, but they had everybody write a piece of anonymous feedback, and then it went into an envelope, and then you took all of that anonymous feedback and went back to your room and read it. And hers was extremely passive aggressive, and I think when you get to the point when you understand people's behaviors and intentions behind that, it doesn't affect you anymore. You're like, this isn't about me. This is about them,
Right. Like there's something going on with them. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is once you start to remove the toxic behaviors from your life, like I removed the toxic romantic relationship, I removed some toxic families or family members, a toxic friend, and toxic work environments. And what that does is it opens up and allows so much space for all of the good.
Yeah.
There's a study that scientists did in Kenya where they observed a troop of baboons. And in that troop of baboons, there's like three groups. There's a group of aggressive, abusive, domineering males. there was a group of more kind, amiable, friendly males, and then there was a group of women, and the female baboons were nurturing and warm and loving and caring. And the abusive, domineering males went out to scavenge for food, and they came across a garbage pen, like a garbage bin full of meat. They devoured it. Well, that meat was tainted, and unfortunately, they all died. And so you think about what happens in a community after you remove those toxic behaviors. Do the other males that were more amiable and kind take over those domineering, abusive, aggressive behaviors? Or does a more harmonious, empathetic, nurturing culture evolve? And it was the latter. And, so I love to use that as an example because I think that's just in nature generally. And I can tell you the same thing happened for me. Once I stepped out of toxic work environments, removed the toxic, coworkers from my life and people from my life, like now it's just all authentic, genuine, warm, kind, caring people. And your relationships flourish so much more because that's what you're focused on.
Yeah. And you feel safer, which is something like Nicola loves, the whole psychological safety aspect of, being everything really, like personal and work, but then you can feel safe to be vulnerable, and that's where all the growth happens, right? Or you can ask the question that maybe previously you thought someone would make fun of you for being such a stupid question to ask, whatever. Yeah,
absolutely. I talk about it in my podcast. I just recently started opening up about it. I have a narcissistic mother.
Ditto.
And brother.
Aren't they a fun time?
Yeah.
And brother. Yeah. So I actually about a little over a year and a half ago, I ended up going no contact with my mom. In 2020, I consciously started stepping away from my brother, like just not engaging anymore. Gray rock method. And it's been really great. But that was a big part of the journey for me. And then doing that inner child work, like if people haven't done that, that's really, really a big part of my journey too. Like for me, it was like, I was able to meditate and go back to that 4-year-old little girl that basically became an adult because I had to take care of myself. And I was like, oh, I got this. But yeah, so I do talk about that in a podcast, and it was my hardest breakup. Like, I think anybody that oftentimes children that step away from a narcissistic parent, people are like, well, that's your only mom, that's your dad, that's so-and-so. And like the onus is on that person. It's like, you don't understand what we've been through and the emotional abuse and manipulation and trauma. And that is the last resort. Like they don't realize that it's
not really
everything.
apparent. And that's something that people can't really wrap their heads around, is it's like you've had to kind of self-raise versus, oh, we had such a loving family environment.
And I think that's a big part of the reason why I was brought into these children's lives, is to help break that cycle for them and their family, because every kid deserves unconditional love from two parents.
Absolutely.
And I only had unconditional love from one parent, and they only had unconditional love from one parent. And so I'm happy that I still get to be in their lives to be able to, hopefully for them to, receive that.
Yeah. So were you just this is just because I got mad at some of the women in my life at that time who knew what was going on, but just chose not to tell me. And when confronted, they were like, well, we thought you knew. And it's like, you don't know what you don't know. Like, it was just like mind boggling to me that, like, did his ex, who now seems like you're close to, did she know this was going on, and did she warn you? Or like, how close were you? It sounds like you did communicate with her, on your own, aside from him, because you mentioned that you had asked her if you could switch the kids' days or whatever.
So we didn't communicate a lot. He did a really good job of keeping us apart. So when we first started dating, it was like in the first month, he was like, oh, I can't wait for you to meet my kids. And I was like, what? Like, well, what does their mom say about this? Because for me, I immediately went into like, I'm not a mother. I don't have biological children of my own, but I would want to know who my kids are around,
of
right?
course.
So like instantly I put myself in her shoes because I am an empath also. So it's like you want to
That's the
step
worst for
into.
narcissists. Oh,
I
That's
know.
probably why you're preyed on, right? Because they see
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
they just love
So
that juicy little snack bit.
yeah. So it was the first time that her children had consistency. It was the first time since they had split up that she felt that her children were safe, that they were loved, and that they were cared for. And like this is the good stuff, but also the hard stuff, right? Like I didn't know any of that then. And she, and she gave me full range. She was the only person that got to read the book before it came out because I wanted to make sure I was so respectful of her and the kids that I wanted to make sure that she was comfortable with everything that was in it. But there's one moment where we had been dating for a few months and she confronted him and said, I like Ginny. I like her for our children. And he was like, oh no, like I've totally changed. And,
Oh yes. Oh, they always totally change
yeah,
within
they've
a
always,
minute.
they've always totally changed. And so, but when I asked about meeting her, I was like, how do you want, like, I'd really like to meet her just so she knows, like, and is comfortable with who's around her kids. And I was like, we could meet for coffee or a glass of wine, or just like when I'm doing school pickup or whatever, because she's a teacher and she taught at one of the kids' schools. So, and he came back and he was like, yeah, she just wants to meet at school pickup. I was like, okay, that's fine. Well, fast forward to after we split up and her and I start comparing notes. She was like, he never asked me. He would have never let us be in the same room together. But in hindsight, if her and I would have sat down and we were just a few months into dating, and if she started to tell me about her experience that she had with him, would have I just thought, oh, she's just the crazy, jealous ex? And he would have spun it that way, right? Like we're all crazy. He's telling people that I'm my book and I'm ruining his life because it's all lies. Well, if it's all lies and you're such a wonderful, upstanding citizen and, general good guy, just keep going and doing the good in the world. But yeah.
Is that what Chad used to say to you? You're my favorite.
So I coined that because saying I love you is very difficult for me. So I coined you're my favorite as our I love you. Yes.
Yeah,
And
it's a
then,
thing, right? Because when you've got
Yeah.
narcissistic parents, you don't have the option of saying that.
yeah, you don't know, like it's such a learning journey. So yeah, so that's where in the name of the book, I changed it last minute. It had a completely different working name for 3 years. And then I changed it last minute and it just really fit. But the girl, I call her the toddler, that he dated for a while, cause she was like 25 and he was 45.
I can't stand you.
I know I'm the worst sometimes.
I love it.
So the girl that was
I love
living with him at the time when my book came out, she had reached out to me and she was like, that's what he says to me. Like he literally all of this, like he pulls and he just uses and recycles the same tactics over and over. Yeah. So
Gross.
yeah.
Refer them to the secret Facebook page.
Yes. There you go.
Oh my God. Well, this has literally been such a journey, right?
It has.
It has. It's been a journey. There's been plot twists rather, and different, like we veered off, but I really enjoyed it. Nicola, do you have any questions or anything you want to say?
I'd say tell us where our listeners can find you. Give us all the deets as to where they can hunt you down.
Sure. All of my stuff is just my name, Ginny Preem. So I hang out on social media the most on Instagram. That's Ginny Preem. My website is Ginny Preem. So if you are looking to book me for motivational speaking engagement, my website is the best place to do that. My book you can buy on Amazon. It's called You're My Favorite. My podcast is Drinking with Gin, which can be listened to on any of the major platforms. So whatever you're listening to this on, you should be able to find Drinking with Gin. And then I just launched my newsletter, so you can sign up for that as well through any of my links.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
This one hit close to home for me. So it was so nice. Like I could talk about it so calmly because like it truly does not make a difference to me anymore. Yeah. All right.
It's been awesome having you on. So thank you.
Yeah.
Ginny. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm actually looking up your podcast right now and I'm going to subscribe.
Subscribe and
you.
follow. For anyone that's listening, subscribe and follow all of our podcasts. Ours, Ginny's, everybody's. Just do that.
And leave a review. Leaving a review is so nice. Leave a 5-star review for
please.
this podcast today.
Thank you, Ginny.
Yes.
And when you listen to Ginny's podcast, do the same thing.
Yes, unequivocally. If your podcast is even like as fun as this was, I'm sure it's more fun. It should get 5-star review all the time.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Well, it has been awesome, and we really appreciate your time and the fact that you've taken our time today to talk to us not only about like the salacious drama behind your book, but also your experience in toxic workplaces.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Let's Break Up, Toxic Workplace Stories. If you enjoyed our candid conversations and insights, don't forget to hit that like button, follow us on social media, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform.